Hey, thanks for stopping by. This is going to be the start of a new series that I'm creating on this channel, which is going to be an introductory series to GUIs on Roblox. So I'm currently doing my advanced scripting tutorial guide on Roblox, and this tutorial guide will serve as something that will be done on the side. Because I feel like a lot of the advanced scripting concepts cannot be explained until there's a firm grasp understanding of GUI aspects inside of your Roblox game, and this is a whole new aspect of game developing if you're brand new to this. So that's why a separate tutorial guide I feel would be appropriate to be able to understand how important GUIs actually are. So for this first episode, this is going to be a very broad introduction to what GUIs are and how they're used inside of Roblox games. And then for the next couple of episodes, I'm going to be going over different instances that we can use that Roblox has provided for us to put inside of our games. And so I think the first question to answer is, what is a GUI? A GUI is basically short for graphical user interface, and it's the things that you see inside of any Roblox game that shows any graphical images or text labels or any on-screen art. So things like labels, containers, text buttons, labels, images, all that sort of stuff. Imagine if I'm playing a game. On the top right side, this shows my leaderboard. This is counted as a GUI because this is on screen. So if I move my camera around in the 3D world, this will still remain the same here. It's a user interface that only I can see. We even have another button here, which we can press and then it'll show us a bunch of options. We even have our menu button right here that pulls up a panel that shows the menu. You can see settings, report, help, record, and all this other stuff that Roblox has for us. And so this is pretty much what I'm talking about here. Any Roblox game imaginable has these GUI elements inside of their games, whether that would be a health bar or navigational buttons on the side, or an admin commands panel. So I hope you kind of understand what I'm talking about. This guide will teach you how to create all these things step by step as I go through each of the instances that Roblox has made for us to be able to do these things. And before we start creating, I'm going to show you one more example that was created by the Roblox Developer Hub that I think will capture what we'll be doing for the rest of this guide. All right, let's think about this for a minute. So this image is from the Introduction to UI page in the Roblox Developer Hub, and I just think this is a great example to show what we're potentially going to be creating with GUI elements that we're going to add into our game, modify, and make it look nice. So you notice that there's a bunch of things here. So you see that there's a text here that says enter your character's name. You even have like a box where you can enter some text in. You even have an arrow right here, and it's all wrapped around inside of this frame. So you might have guessed, this entire border panel thing you see here is called a frame. So this frame acts as a container for all of these other things that are inside of this frame. So if we want to manipulate this frame, it'll also manipulate everything else that's going on inside of this frame. And where we're able to just put text here, this is called a text label, where we just say enter your character's name. It's just a text label. You can't really do anything else with it. You could just, look at it. And then down here where it says enter your username, you can actually click on it and enter in a text inside of this little box here. This is called a text box, which, like I mentioned, allows you to input text inside of a text box so that whatever script is running this can take this text and do whatever it wants to do with it. And then finally, we have this arrow button right here, which is called a image button because we're taking an image ID from the Roblox catalog, putting it in here, and acting as if the player can actually press this label, which is why it's called an image button. So these are some examples of instances we're going to use inside of our GUI scripts. And I just thought this was a great representation as to what we're going to be doing. Now that we understand that, let's start creating our first GUI. Now you might ask, where do we actually create this GUI? And to that I say, I would like to introduce you to a new folder inside of the Explorer, which is called StarterGui. StarterGui is basically a folder that allows us to create any GUI inside of our Roblox game, and whatever we put inside of this folder will be copied over to each player whenever they play the game. So I'll go more into detail about this once we actually start creating one. So let's do that right now. Now there is something we have to put inside of the StarterGui in order for us to actually start creating our GUI elements, and that is going to be called a ScreenGui, which basically acts as our main frame to where we can actually put the contents of our GUI inside of. So if we click this plus sign and we search up ScreenGui, this is what the object looks like. So let's click this, and nothing on our screen has changed. But like I mentioned, in order for us to add GUI elements, we need to put them inside of a ScreenGui. We cannot put them inside of StarterGui, otherwise it just will not show up on the screen. We have to insert a ScreenGui and then add elements inside of that ScreenGui. So you may have noticed there's a bunch of properties here, which we are going to go over in this episode. But just as a test, let's create a text label so that we can actually see what this looks like inside of our studio. So let's hit the plus sign and let's search up text label. Let's click that. And as you can see, Roblox has inserted a text label for us to see inside of Studio. If we click on it, we can actually see that Roblox has given us a tool where we can scale this up and down however we please, and we can even move it around inside of Studio like so. So it's a very nice feature Roblox has provided for us, especially for beginners, and so that's the neat thing about it. But now let me show you what this looks like inside of the game. So on the right side, let's quickly rename our ScreenGui. So let's right click and rename it. Let's call this main GUI. And now let's go into the game by hitting test and hitting play and see what happens. So I've loaded into the game, and as you can see, our text label is on our screen. If we go on the right side, go to our player, and we can see that there's a folder here, which I have not introduced yet. This is the PlayerGui. This is essentially where everything that we've created inside of StarterGui goes into. So if we open this up, we can see that there's two ScreenGuis. So FreeCam is something that Roblox has created by default. But then we can see that our main GUI is here inside of our PlayerGui folder. And so when we're working with manipulating GUI elements, it's highly advised to do it inside of the PlayerGui and not inside of StarterGui. Because let's say, for example, we want to delete this main GUI. If we delete it in the StarterGui, nothing happens. That's because this is just the StarterGui folder where whatever's inside of the StarterGui folder gets copied over to the players. But that had no effect. If we go to our PlayerGui folder and delete the main GUI, then it actually does get rid of it from our player side. So that's a little interesting detail to take note of as we manipulate GUI elements later on in this guide. So for the rest of this tutorial, I'm going to be introducing some very commonly used properties for ScreenGuis, and then for the next upcoming episodes, I'm going to be talking about more of like these text labels and buttons in greater detail. So let's click on our main GUI, and we can see that we have a bunch of properties here. I'm going to be introducing you to 4 of them because I know the 4 that I'm going to introduce are very commonly used. So the 4 that I'm going to introduce are DisplayOrder, Enabled, IgnoreGui Inset, and ResetOnSpawn. But let's go with Enabled first because I think this is the most self-explanatory one. So basically, this determines whether or not this should be displayed or not. If we click on it, then as you can see, our text label disappeared inside of the game. So we can no longer see any of the elements that are contained inside of the ScreenGui, which currently just only has this text label. So if we just click this again, then we should be able to see it right back up again when we play the game. Now you might ask, does this work while we play the game? Yeah, for sure. I'm in the game right now. If we go to our PlayerGui really quick with our main GUI and we press Enabled, then yeah, it's gotten rid of. So this is pretty useful if you don't want to show specific GUIs on screen at certain points during the game. I think that's pretty much all I need to explain for that one. I think that's pretty easy. The next property I'll introduce is IgnoreGuiInset. Now, I don't exactly know why, but for some reason, whenever you play a Roblox game, there seems to be like a little gap from our on-screen GUI resolution and from the actual game when we play the game. So I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let's take our label, so let's select this. Let's drag this to the corner of our screen, and we'll scale this all the way across. Now let's go into the game and hit play and see what happens. So as you can see, Roblox has by default allocated some space up here for their own use. And this is what it's like by default for every single game. So even if we had our label on the very corner of the screen during Studio, it's not actually at the very corner of our screen. So the easiest way to deal with this is by checking this option, IgnoreGuiInset, and if we go back into the game, we should see that this is no longer a problem. So as you can see, the GUI has completely ignored Roblox's inset that used to be up here, this little extra space. And so now we're able to freely use it if we decide to have stuff up here. The third property is ResetOnSpawn. And so essentially by default, whenever a player joins the game and then they reset their character, then whatever was manipulated with that player's GUI, it will be reverted back to its original state. So what it originally was inside of the starter GUI, it will then copy it over to the player GUI every single time the player resets their character. So let me show you an example. So let's open up my player GUI, main GUI, and text label. Let's change the background color of this text label to, let's say, blue. So if I reset my character, then what should happen is that it gets reverted back to white because that was the original state of our text label inside of our starter GUI. So whatever changes we made to the main GUI, it's just going to reset itself back to what it originally was. If we want to keep the changes, then we simply just uncheck the reset on spawn. And if we go back into our game and make the changes that we made to our text label by changing its color, then we should be able to keep those changes. So let's change the color back to blue again, and let's reset our character. We should then see that our text label remains the same with its color because main GUI did not refresh when the player resetted their character. And finally, the last property I'll introduce in this episode is going to be DisplayOrder. There will be cases where we're going to have multiple screen GUIs for organizational purposes. So let's actually duplicate our main GUI by right-clicking and hitting duplicate. And let's call this screen GUI main GUI 2. And let's actually take this text label and just drag it down here a little bit. And let's also change the color of this text label to blue again. Essentially what DisplayOrder does is that it prioritizes what screen GUI will display over any of the other screen GUIs. So right now, it looks like main GUI 2 is overlapping the first main GUI with the white text label. But if we change the display order of main GUI to something that's a bigger number, like 1, we can actually see that our white text box, our main GUI, is now overlapping our second GUI. But if we just do this again by making main GUI 2's display order something that's larger than the other one, display order 5, for example, then this will overlap the first one. I hope this makes sense, and if it does, then I'm glad that you're getting a good feel for GUIs, because this is going to be something you will use a lot inside of your Roblox games. And so that's pretty much where I'm going to end it off here with this tutorial. So we introduced GUIs and screen GUIs. But in the next episode, we're going to be talking about text labels in more detail, manipulating their properties and whatnot, going more in depth with their properties. Be sure to join my Discord server. The link is in the description, and I will see you in the next episode. Take care.